Hi, my name is Marcia Lehman, and I'm a Knox County Master Gardener. Today, in the Prune Like a Pro series, we'll be talking about pruning Crape Myrtles. The first thing, we beg, we plead, please do not commit what we call Crape Murder. The picture on the left is someone in my subdivision who does this every year. Those trunks are about 4 feet tall, and every year they get cut back to 4 feet. The one on the right, as you can see, is close to the corner of the house, so it's about 1 story tall, so that's 8, 9, maybe 10 feet. Again, every year the homeowner cuts it back like this. And my bigger concern, yes, I'm concerned about the health of the plant, but I'm also a bit concerned that a crepe myrtle of this size is this close to the foundation of the house. But as a friend of mine likes to say, nature doesn't need a coat rack, so there's no reason to do Crape Murder. This is what happens when you do Crape Murder. You go from having nice big thick stems at the bottom, you come up and this is where it got cut off, and as we all know, pruning triggers new growth. So then you get a cluster of who knows how many, 6, 8, 10 spindly little shoots that come out. And that transition from the very thick stem to these spindly things just doesn't look natural because it's not natural. You know, this one's in a side yard. This one, I don't know if that's painting of a scar. I couldn't get close enough, not my property. Or if that's actually marking to have that stem taken off much lower. But they've done the same thing. It does look like they've thinned out the number of shoots here, but they still have this really abrupt transition from main stem to spindly shoots. And then, of course, as you can see in the one on the right, it's a great place to trap leaves, which get wet during the winter. And since you've got those big scars, can also introduce rot. The only consolation is that Crape Myrtles are almost impossible to kill. They can take the abuse. That doesn't mean they're not stressed. They don't really enjoy it. But while it seriously stresses a plant, it rarely kills it. There would have to be something else going on in addition. Here's one where the home was sold and the new homeowner has stopped the annual murder process. So it may recover, but as you can see, we've got the same big thick stem coming up here, and then we've got a bunch of shoots. So while dormant this time of year, January or so, it would be wise to come in and reduce those shoots to 1, 2, at most 3. And then with fewer shoots, there's less competition for nutrients. So the ones that you keep out of all this mess, the ones that you keep will actually get a little bit more girth, a little more thickness on them because they're not competing for nutrients. And in a few years, this abrupt transition will not look quite so abrupt. But pruning this will be a very tedious process of taking out all these extra shoots. And definitely this is a job that's going to have to be on a ladder, because one of the things that was done correctly is that they stripped all the little side branches off up the first 5 feet or so, which is a good thing to do. We'll talk about that. And they left 3 main stems here. So they got a few things right, but they kept topping the tree, which is just not a good thing to do for Crape Myrtles or for any other tree. Now, while the new homeowner stopped murdering the Crape Myrtle tree, the sad news is that they have continued to murder the shrubs, the Crape Myrtle shrubs that line their driveway. And in fact, they did this about Christmas time, which was just a tad early. So what would I do with this Crape Myrtle? For starters, I would stop topping it. It's got you know, a cluster of shoots here that you, and the abrupt transition that you can see. I would stop doing that, and I would come in and do the same thing and reduce the shoots to 2 or 3 per knob or knuckle. The second thing I would do would be to remove one of the 2 stems in the middle, and I would probably take this one on the left because of the way it then comes up and hits this other one. It is definitely in the middle, and it comes up and hits this other main stem. So I would take that one in the middle, and I would take it off down here as low as possible. And then I would remove the stem that comes up also out of the middle, but then wraps around. It looks like somebody took it when it was a whip and wrapped it in between here. And I would take that off because that's not a good growth habit. And then I would stop and reassess next year. Here's another one. I would have loved to have shot this one in the video, but I was never able to make contact with the homeowner. The good news is it has never been murdered. It has never been topped. The sad part is I don't think it has ever been pruned, but I'd rather face this situation than one where I have to renovate it and try and help it recover from murder. So I've got the full tree here, and that's a good 10 or 12 feet tall. On the right, I've got the base because we're going to start to work on that virtually. So I would start at the bottom and remove all the suckers, any small stems. And while there's currently 5 or 6, again, I did not go on the property. I shot this from the street. There are 5 or 6 stems in here. I would keep 2 or 3 main stems. So I'd probably take out this one, and I would definitely take out this one. And then I'd have to walk around the backside to see just how many there are. Continuing, once I've taken those out, I would strip all the side branches from the ground level up 4 or 5 feet. So I'd take off the first one where the little yellow line is. I'd take off that one. I'd take off that one. And I'm taking those off at the ground. So I'm going to be removing a fair amount of length, but that's okay. To make one cut and get rid of all that at once. I'd take off that. I'd take off that. And again, as I walk around behind the plant, I'm probably going to find some more coming off the back. And then I would stand back and look at the overall shape. Will the middle allow good airflow and let a lot of sunlight into the middle? So enough virtual pruning. Let's go and prune a real crepe myrtle where I have had a chance to talk to the homeowner, and I do have permission to go on their property. And let's go do that.
Okay, so here I am at the homeowners where I have permission to prune this crepe myrtle at the corner of their house. And the first thing you notice is that there's a bunch of ivy or ground cover growing around the base. So I'm not going to make you watch that, but the first thing I'm going to do is go remove that so I can see what I'm working with at the base of the plant. Okay, and as often is the case, things were a little worse than I expected. There was a lot of ivy around here, and so I've removed all of it so that I could, and I pulled back some of the mulch too, because for instance, these little stubs on the right, they weren't at all obvious with the mulch there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my loppers and I'm going to clean up all that crud around the bottom, those little stubs. Then I'm going to work my way up and take off what is already dead, just so I can see what I have left to work with. Here, I've brought the camera around to the back side of the crepe myrtle so that you can see on the left where I took off some, you see exposed wood. There were actually 3 little dead stubs coming out of there. One right in front of that, another one to the right of that. And what I really want you to take a look at, I'll come back around the front to show you this, but we have what is called occluded bark, where these stems here have actually grown together. So I have a bit of a challenge of where I take this off. So the first thing I'm going to do, you can notice a bunch of short, dead-looking stubs, like here. Here's some more, where improper pruning cuts were made and left a stub that was 4 to 6 inches, and those just die with time. So I'm going to clean those up, step back, take another look, decide what I'm going to do next. Okay, I don't remember if I told you, but I made 10 cuts, mostly with my loppers, to clean up the base of this plant. Those things coming out at the ground. Then, as I was taking off dead wood and making a closer inspection, I took off 2 somewhat sizable branches, but probably made about 20 additional snips. And the thing I want to show you is that I would really like to keep one of these stems in the middle, except that in this middle section, there are 3 stems that are intertwined, and they've actually grown together, so that is occluded bark. That's not a good situation, and so I think the best thing to do is to take all 3 of those out at the bottom, which will make the middle a little empty, but occluded bark is not strong. All you need is a good windstorm, heavy snow, and the like, and those are likely to break, and then you've got other problems. That was more than just a little bit of work. I pulled that triplet out and have it actually standing in front of the Crape Myrtle. It turns out that of the triplet, 2 of those pieces came off of one stem, the third one came off of a second stem. This is why when the plant is just a couple years old, you want to choose the 2 or 3 best main stems, prune out everything else. Don't let this happen, or you end up with a pretty significant pruning job. As you can see now, I've got 4 stems left. Let me walk up here in front and show you what I'm talking about. I've got a main stem here, main stem here. Here comes one that splits, and what you can't see is on the back side there's a significant scar here, so I'm a little concerned about that. And then I've got a stem that comes up here and splits again. Now, since the homeowner said they don't want anything getting close to the house, I think what I'm going to do is to take this one off down here at the ground, and that will leave me 1, 2, 3. And then I have to decide what I'm going to do about this front side that has a significant scarring damage on it. I think I'm going to take it off, but let me get this back one off first, and then we'll take another look. Okay, so we are down to 3 main stems. This has actually turned out to be much more of a renovation pruning. And yes, as I look at this now, there is a deep scar here. So I'm going to cut this here. The other is that as this wants to grow, it's going to drape out over into the lawn. Okay, so here we are now. I'm going to call it quits. I mean, I'm not done. I have a lot of cleanup to do. But as far as pruning goes, I'm finished. I now have 3 main stems at the bottom. Let me try and go up. We are stripped of side branches up about 4 feet or so. You can see the one in the center then forks, and that one then forks again. The one on the left has a fork, and the one on the very right has a fork as well once you get up a little higher. So this doesn't look very much like it did when we first started. I would say that sometime in its history it was Crape murdered because of the type of stubs that I found, and in fact some of those prior murder cuts influenced where I decided to make the current cuts, because there was dead wood there, which is never going to regrow anything, so I needed to take it off. And then you say, okay, if I've got to take this off, then I should probably go a little bit further and get a good clean cut. But this should bloom out nicely in the summer, and from now on should just need really a quick tune-up, if at all, for removal of dead, diseased, damaged, dysfunctional.
Okay, so we're back from pruning the real Crape Myrtle. And just to summarize, on Crape Myrtles, the first thing we want to do is provide for main branch spacing. So again, cut less. You can always take more out, but you can't put it back. So we would start at the bottom in this diagram and we would take off suckers. And then we would take off these. We have 5 main stems here. We would take off the 2 that are the lighter in color. Those would be removed. And then we would come into the middle. And once we've taken off these 2 big ones, we've taken a lot of the middle stuff out. But there's a few more little middle branches, like we could take this one off of this dark brown. That would get rid of that. That would open it up a lot. We would thin out the center. That's what we're doing for beneficial air and for good airflow and sunlight. And then, of course, any time of year, you can remove the 4Ds. So if you go out and you find more suckers, take them off ASAP. Do not wait. Suckers should be removed immediately. But if you also find that branches are now crossing or rubbing, particularly as they get a heavy flower set on them, or if you discover any dead branches, or anything that's really growing at an odd angle and just doesn't look right, you can take those off any time of year. So again, on Crape Myrtles, like many other shrubs, and small trees, we're pruning for shape, not really to manage the size. We're going to let it get the height and the width that it naturally would grow to, but we're pruning it for shape and airflow and sunshine, not just to keep it to a manageable size. The folks who are doing Crape Murder would defend what they're doing by saying, well, it's too big and I'm trying to prune it for size. If it's too big, then it's planted in the wrong space. So if you get the plant in the right spot, then your pruning is for shape and appearance, not for managing the size. Thank you for joining us today.